Mary from Baton Rouge. I'm in New Orleans right now. Not too far away, I think. Again, as you're entering into the webinar, if you would please just state where you're from and why you are interested in earth care. And we will get started, and I would like to welcome you to the 6th webinar in our Family Friendly Earth Care series. My name is Kelly Kunkel. I'm an extension educator in health and nutrition with the University of Minnesota Extension. And I'd like to thank Julie Larson today. She is our webinar producer, and she will be recording this webinar and will monitor the chat for any questions that you might have, and we will take those questions at the end of the webinar. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Angela Gupta is a University of Minnesota Extension professor of forestry and is a founding member of the Minnesota Women's Woodland Network. In 2021, she started leading an Extension Gathering Partners Conference Environmental Sustainability Initiative to track conference carbon use and work towards a carbon neutral conference in 2022. Personally, Angie has strived for many years to make environmentally friendly decisions and enable healthy living at home. She has earned a MA in organizational management from Spring Arbor University and a BS in forestry from the University of Kentucky. Prior to joining Extension, Angie was an industrial forester working with a private landowner in Michigan and a U.S. Peace Corps agroforestry extensionist in Kenya, East Africa. Please join me in a virtual round of applause for Angela Gupta.
So I think maybe you're turning it over for me, as Kelly has said a couple of times, that if you would please put in the chat where you're from and why you're interested in earth care, that would be great. And I believe we're recording. Should I go ahead and get started? Excellent, I think I will.
Yes, please.
So the overview for today's presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about family and family dynamics and individual versus collective action. And then hopefully I'm going to lay out a bunch of manageable actions that you can do within the household related to communication, eating, waste, transportation and energy, carbon footprints and offsets, and then earth care. And then at the very end, I will for sure drop in all of the resource links that I have, although Julie may also drop them in as I go. So don't feel like you need to take copious notes. And I want to start out with, this is one of the many unexpected journeys that I have discovered I am on. I have recently in the last few years done a fair bit of programming around women and forestry, and it might feel obvious to people that I would be on this journey, but it was never my intent to talk about women in forestry. I am just a forester who happens to be female. Similarly, I do not like parenting in the digital age, and yet I find I do this every single day, much to my great exasperation. And so it is one of the many things like earth care and climate change that I find I have to think about, even if this isn't really where I would like to put many of my brain cells. So then I want to talk about family decisions. They are complicated. So this is my family. And when it kind of slipped that I had been asked to do this presentation, I kid you not, this is what my husband said. Why would they ask you to do this presentation? We aren't earth friendly. And I will tell you, I was immediately meted that comment with exasperation and anger, and then realized that maybe it has become so normal in my family, my husband no longer recognizes it, which is maybe the best place. This is, of course, what my teenage son said. Don't talk about us. You're so embarrassing. And clearly, I'm going to disregard those comments. And I want to say this is our recent spring break trip to Brussels, where we went to Europe. And so I want to just sort of say that because we make a lot of decisions, and flying to Europe is not the most environmentally friendly decision out there, yet that is what we did. And I'll talk about kind of how this all plays out. I also thought it's important that I wrote a paragraph just to make this word cloud that were my priorities for my family and what I suspected my kids and my husband would have as priorities for my family. And as you can see, like the environment and earth don't make the top level in big letters. So healthy does. We do lots of things a lot. Soccer is very important to my boys. Family is important to us. I talk about my husband a fair bit, turns out, and my boys. But you can see in the background, I mean, environment is in there, vegetables are in there, gardening is in there, climate is in there. They're in there, but they're just a smattering of the decisions that go into any, the criteria that go into any decision. And I just want to own that. So now I want to talk a little bit about this for individual versus collective action. And so I love this article from 2021 in Scientific America. It was really about how ExxonMobil's messaging shifted blame about global warming to consumers. This was a very common approach by many large corporations in America to take the onus of making change away from them, the corporation, and putting it on us as consumers. That was easier for them, that you didn't have to clean up your own shop if you could decide and persuade consumers that they needed to clean up their business. There is only limited, I mean, so this is what they did. There's not actually a lot of controversy about that. But there is truth in the fact that what I as an individual do related to carbon footprints and environmental care is very limited. And the largest changes and the things that have to happen are at levels much above my own. And that is not to say that what I do doesn't matter, but I have to talk about it and make this a normal part of my decision making and how I vote and how I engage with the world in order to push that up so that places like my local Rochester Public Utility makes changes that ultimately are much more impactful than my individual household level changes. So if you want to think more about this or you're skeptical about anything I just said, there's this great podcast, Is Your Carbon Footprint BS? How to Save the Planet Takes Over Ologies. It's a podcast. Again, this is one of the links. Julie can drop it in, or it will be at the very end. It's about 45-minute podcast, and it really looks at this, what's it worth as a consumer level and what's the big picture? And it lands in this, we have to do both space, which is where I'm going to occupy today. So first, I'm going to talk about communication. It costs nothing, well, maybe a little social capital, but to talk about these things, and that is incredibly important. And so first, the fact that my husband doesn't even recognize we do it means it's become very normal. And I think it's really important to make earth care a normal part of the culture and society in which we live. Public declarations are one way in which we do that. And so this is a little pollinator friendly sign in my front yard that is there as soon as things leaf out. And this isn't a pile of weeds. This is an actual dedicated space for pollinator friendly natives. Similarly, we have standardized activity in my house with this basketball hoop. This is advocating for my local school system. And this is a soccer goal in my front yard, a part of that normalizing activity. We know that accountability buddies, you see this in dieting a lot, but accountability buddies can be really helpful. Someone that you can sort of speak your intentions to, and they can help keep you accountable, can be very important. I think in a family, it would be ideal if that was your spouse. If not, maybe it's a sibling or a child that is really interested in the environment. I will say sometimes I feel like I walk this path alone in my household, but if you can get accountability buddy, that is really, really helpful. My parents are very environmentally minded, and so there's some accountability there. I think it's important to recognize that eco-anxiety is a real thing. My husband took a new job and it requires a lot of travel, and it causes me a lot of carbon anxiety and climate anxiety. And so I just need to work through that and recognize this as both a barrier and a motivation. I think, so this arrow on the left, green being the most environmentally friendly and red being the least, is sort of my best guess at how these things rank out. But I think passivity, silence, and inaction are deeply problematic. We need to make change. We need to make these things normal. And if we don't talk about it, we're quiet, and we don't take action, that will not happen. So talking about food, so again, the scale on the right, to be really clear, the most environmentally friendly food choices are vegan, followed by vegetarian, local foods, and then eating meat occasionally and eating meat regularly. This is really based on resource utilization. I've been a vegetarian since I was about 18, very much for that reason. It takes way fewer calories in the ecosystem to feed me as a vegetarian than it does to feed me as a meat eater. I will say that at my house, we eat almost exclusively vegetarian, yet I am the only vegetarian. My husband, born and raised as a Hindu in India, yet and Hinduism is a vegetarian religion and culture, yet he is no longer a vegetarian. And my boys eat meat. But in our household, where we eat the mass majority of our meals and we do all of our cooking, we really don't eat hardly any meat at all. It's definitely a special occasion kind of activity. And so that's just a norm that we've created. These pictures, this is a garlic mustard pesto here from some of our earth care activities. And then that's an invasive plant we bring back and we make pesto and it gets frozen. This is some local apples that I create into applesauce every year. And this turned out to be not very good cranberry jam from an invasive high bush cranberry. And I really should have used the native, but this was a part of our Thanksgiving dinner. So just sort of creeping this in all the time. I also want to be really clear that I am feeding 2 teenage boys right now. I feel like they eat with the frequency of infants, but the enthusiasm of lumberjacks. And so, to be honest and frank, we also have a Costco membership and Amazon Prime membership. And while I strive and I try to institutionalize ways I can eat well and healthy and locally, we do not do this exclusively. And so feeding the family, it is a thing, it takes a lot of energy. So we've really worked to normalize these behaviors within our family, making healthy choices, eating mostly vegetarian, eating locally where we can. And I'll talk about how we've institutionalized that. We share the effort in my family. I think that's important. And then we do not strive for perfection. Absolutely not. And this is a picture of my boys when they were much younger at their local elementary school. They had this community garden that the kids helped to raise the produce. And I was a volunteer there for a number of years. And so these are my kids out there picking produce in the middle of the summer as we're in charge of watering for the week. So, these are things that it's not actually hard to tap into, but I do think creates this level of normalization that is really important. So we've been members of community supported agriculture, or CSAs, for well over a decade, quite a number of CSAs when you add them up. But at this point, I get 1 vegetable share per season, a full share. This is actually a picture of 2 shares. We went on vacation. The beauty of this is a CSA is I essentially buy a small part of a farm, and then that guarantees me a box of produce typically every week. And that produce is all locally grown and it is healthy. And I get only produce shares. I don't get meat shares, although that is a choice. And so this institutionalizes this absolute repeat influx of healthy local foods into my household. I don't have to think about it. I purchase it up front and it comes, and now I work my way through it. Here's a different image. This is not a full box. I've emptied some of it out. You can see not all the produce looks great. I'm okay with that. I know how to use apples that aren't grade A, and I'm happy to take them. There is a risk. So we get now 2 egg shares, and this is only 1 egg because we eat a lot of eggs. I feel like it's always empty. There's a risk. So if my CSA gets avian flu and all of the chickens have to be killed, then I won't get shares for a number of weeks. And that's the risk that I take when I join a CSA, and I'm okay with that. So we have 2 egg shares and 1 veggie share this year. And I will own that it takes a lot of practice to understand how to use all of that volume as it comes in. And so I was asked on Facebook a couple of years ago to talk about how I get through all of that. And it takes practice, but you do it and you end up making meals like this that the whole family can enjoy and eat. And then we freeze and process quite a bit and put it away for winter. And so it is a learning curve, but I think it's one that if you want to start with a half share and work your way up, I think these are reasonable approaches. Then I do hyperlocal. So there is a small orchard in one of our public parks, which anyone can harvest from. It's real beat up. They don't really manage it. But every year I go out on my bicycle and I harvest apples from that orchard and I cook them up into chips mostly, and then some applesauce. I also have a local orchard that I can go and purchase from. I can pedal there on my bicycle and get the apples and process them, making lots of applesauce and seeds seeds. This, I love this. My parents have a lot of ferns. And so in the spring, hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be able to harvest the fiddleheads. In this particular image, I coupled it with vegan sloppy joe made with lentils. And then this is one of my all-time favorites. So again, that earth care, we were out pulling garlic mustard with a neighbor, an Indian neighbor. She was out there helping us and her family. And I sent a bunch of garlic mustard home with her. It's a kitchen herb that makes great pesto and other things. And she, being Indian, she made it into garlic mustard curry and then sent some back to me. So this is my garlic mustard curry and some dal and some naan. It was quite delicious. And I just love the way that it was not only foraged food that was an invasive species we're getting out of the woods, which has its own benefits. We incorporated some new neighbors and they were able to help us, and then they shared back. And I feel like it's that whole circle of community engagement. And then that same apple orchard in at the local park where I harvest these apples, they're pretty beat up. I make them out to chips. And then every year I give one bag of chips to the mayor, one bag of chips to the Parks and Rec staff, and one bag of chips to the forestry staff as a gentle thank you and reminder that our landscape doesn't just need to be pretty plants, it can also support our community. And then of course, my yard and garden. So I have this garden. It's not actually very big in backyard. This is a peach tree. This is a sweet cherry. The peach tree has actually since passed away. It died. But the sweet cherry is doing exceptionally well, much better than I thought. You can see my strawberries were transported from my other house. They're just getting established. I have some carrots. So now the strawberries have completely taken over. I've got lettuce out there. Of course, I plant tomatoes. I've got gooseberries in my edging in the edge of my yard. I really enjoy those. And then I just sort of love this. So this is Dalmates made with grape leaves. The grape was actually a volunteer. For a while, I couldn't get rid of it. And then I decided to embrace it. And I'm now trying to trellis it up and let it grow. But it's really delicious. I really enjoy making those Dalmates from the grape leaves before the Japanese beetles emerge. So, there's lots of different ways you can incorporate this into your life, but the more you can, the better off it is. Also, I want to say we share and normalize. So years ago, I was so tired of the kids complaining about my food that I decided everyone in my family could make at least one meal a week for the whole family, and they had to meet all the dietary restrictions of the U.S. Department of Ag. So this is a magnet on our refrigerator, and then sure enough, we have for many years done movie nights or game nights, and this is where some of my kids are most creative, but these are like the game night meals. And you can see we get all our food groups in, it's all vegetarian. Sometimes they're themed to the movie or the season. This looks like marshmallows. It's actually apple cores. We've got a smoothie back there, nuts and fruit and popcorn. Then I love this. This son has always been very creative with his food, and so it's themed. He almost always does themed food. So you can see his vegetables are in here. He does have marshmallows, right? But it's such a cute image of the American flag. And then I, on Mother's Day, really like breakfast in bed. So most Mother's Days, my family serves me up breakfast in bed. And I really love this when they put the smiley face and the eggs and the love and raspberries. But these are just some examples of how it is a team effort for us. Everyone now does it. Now it's about 2 meals per week per person. They have to feed the whole family. And so it really has institutionalized a lot of things. It also means they've become quite good cooks, which I have to say during the pandemic, felt really overwhelming to feed my family. So we upped the volume that other people would do it. And they really stepped up. But this is what we have to live by. Don't beat yourself up. Do the best. Do your best. Don't beat yourself up, because I'll tell you, cooking with little kids, there are sometimes some mishaps. And we also have partaken in like the school food program, right? So this typically isn't local. It's not necessarily food I eat. It includes a lot more meat than we would typically buy. This sits in our freezer for a long time. But we're part of the community, and it felt important to participate, and so we did. Similarly, I don't want you to get the impression that we eat healthy all the time. We bake a lot of sweets. And look at this. I go to take the picture and somebody's hand creeps in there. I mean, it wasn't even staged. I just got to tell you that's what happens. So, we're real people. We like cookies and brownies. So now I'm going to go to consumption and reuse, reduce, recycle. I think we've all heard that phrase before, but I want to be really clear. The most earth-friendly thing to do is to reduce your consumption, to just buy less. It's quite economical to just buy less as well. But that can be hard. Living with 2 teenage boys, I feel like they're constantly in need of more tennis shoes. I don't know that that's a need. I think it's a want, but it's a thing. And then if you're going to buy stuff, think about how you can reuse it or recycle it or compost it. And there was a whole session on composting. I'm not going to go into that. But the worst case scenario is you buy lots of stuff and it all goes into the landfill. So the more you can reduce that, the better off you're going to be. And I'll be honest, I think in the description for this, it said I would talk about composting. I'm not really. This is my compost bin, and it's not well managed, but I got jumping worms. I have invasive jumping worms in my yard since 2018, and it actually makes composting incredibly tricky and difficult. But I am very acutely aware of that there is the type of composting at my local Olmsted County waste to energy facility, and that is also where they do recycling of many different products, not just your standard suite, although I do have the standard suite of curbside recycling. And I know that my waste, my garbage goes to the Olmsted County Waste to Energy facility and is burnt to make electricity. If your garbage goes to a landfill, then I think concentrating on waste reduction becomes even more important, because landfills are not particularly eco-friendly and they're a very limited space asset. So I think it's important to know what happens to your end products. But most of the things that come into our household for clothing in particular come in this way. We have quite a robust group of people that give us clothes and to whom we give clothes. And so there's a lot of reuse happening. We've also institutional reuse in our family. So this is my mom at her house having a rummage sale. This is my stepdad. So again, this whole family, who are those accountability buddies. This is a coworker, and these are my kids when they were younger at their lemonade stand. And even in the lemonade stand, you can see the recycle bin. So, we don't do this because we can't afford to buy new. We do this because this is what we do. And it turns out this is more economical, and it is much better for the planet if we reduce, reuse, and recycle. I also noticed when I was preparing for this presentation this week that Goodwill is advertising the Earth Day sale. I don't know if that's because Earth Day, it is a more environmentally friendly practice, or it's just another day to have a sale, but it caught my attention because it is better for the earth if we reduce, reuse, and recycle. So now I'm going to switch to transportation and energy. I have lumped these together because as more and more of our transportation choices become electric, the energy grid matters. So I want to just be really clear that most environmentally forms of transportation are walking, biking, and public transit. If you need to use a car, which I suspect most people in Minnesota do, electric cars are most environmentally friendly, followed by hybrid and gas. One car is better than more than one car. So every additional car that you have is an additional environmental impact. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about these types of cars. I can field questions if you're interested, but this is the way to go about it. And recognizing that walking and biking as a transportation and not a hobby requires different stuff. And so we need to, as a community and as individual family units, kind of recognize that. So when it comes to energy, we could probably argue what order these should be in, but this is my best guess at order for environmental sustainability: solar, wind, bioenergy. Nuclear is in almost every energy portfolio you'll find. I'm very torn about how to view that, but it is not a non-renewable energy source. So that's something. We have natural gas, oil, and coal. And I rank these as I think their environmental impact for production is, but these are very common in portfolios in Minnesota, at least. And so I want to say that there are some really big points where you make really big decisions. And one of them is buying a house. We've purchased 2 houses in Rochester. And each time I've told the realtor that the house must be walkable to the library and not uphill. I don't want to bike uphill every day. And both times I've gotten the crazy lady look, but it turns out that we have purchased houses twice that fit that criteria. Walking to the library is just to put a radius around lots of stuff that we can walk or bike to. And then I am quite serious. I bike all the time, and I do not want to bike uphill every day if I don't have to. And so what we ended up with is a 1940s house. So the good news is it's been years since that house was built. And so the construction impact has been spread out over almost a century. It also, I didn't contribute to urban sprawl. That house was built in the 40s. The flip side is I had no decision-making authority on what furnace was in there, what type of appliances, how much insulation. I inherited this house. So that is both an opportunity and a challenge. House has only one garage. We have only one car. I will tell you, it is a fully gas car. When we bought it, the criteria were it had to seat 7 so we could carpool. It had to fit in my garage. And at the time, they made no cars that were hybrid or electric that could do those things. I will tell you today, we talk about new cars. We're probably 6 years from getting one. But right now, I don't think an electric car could be an only car and still get you on a family road trip through North Dakota. So that industry is still very much working on its infrastructure, and I look forward to that becoming more robust. But bikes are absolutely a primary form of infrastructure and transportation at our house. And when I say that, I mean it literally as transportation. So when myself and the boys bike to school and work all year round, we need things like studded tires because biking in the snow is a thing. We need fenders because it turns out back splatter is a drag. And when you're biking in rain and in snow, that matters. I'm a big fan of high capacity. I've got these bike baskets on the front and back because I carry lots of stuff, groceries and library books and work materials. And so when you bike as a form of transportation, it does require different things. I thought as a school, public health would appreciate it if I reminded everyone that biking 3 times per week has a 20% reduction in obesity, high blood pressure, stroke, and diabetes. So not only is it less expensive and more environmentally friendly, it is healthier. My boys have always walked or biked to school all year. I will tell you, there is parental pressure around the appropriateness of having kids walk all year on their own. And so this is what it looks like. We were clearly sledding here, but this is the exact same outfit that actually both of my boys wear for a couple of years. One pieces, they said that got on quicker, and then boots. For many years, my boys each walked through 2 pairs of winter boots getting to and from school. Now, I think this helped them emotionally. I think it helped them academically. They were more able to focus at school after having walked there. I'm certain it was better for their exercise, their daily activity, and I think they were less jittery at home, but it wasn't necessarily easy as a parent. Similarly, I bike to work. I'm currently working from home because we still don't have an office, but for much of my career, I've biked to work and I've biked my kids to daycare. So this was its actually last ride on the Douglas Trail, but I calculated this bike had over 10,000 miles on it. It was a Fleet Farm bike that cost me less than $100. And for many years, this is how I biked my kids to daycare. And so we went to a daycare that I had to go up a hill. The final ascent was up a hill and I couldn't get a running start. There was a stop sign at the bottom. So for years, the only way I could get up that hill is if the boys in the back of the trailer cheered, "Go, mama, go, go, mama, go." And if they were mad at me and they wouldn't cheer, "Go, mama, go," I literally couldn't get up the hill. I would have to get off and push that bike and that trailer up. But it did normalize biking as a form of transportation for my kids, right? Like that's how they got to daycare. And so there are other ways we can do this. My kids have both done 4-H projects around bike safety. So here they are at County Fair. For years, we participated in a Rochester Fest as part of the biking contingent. This is my mom on the far right. She's an active leader in the biking community in town. And here are my kids when they were younger. And I've biked for work. This is me leading a field tour for Extension a few years ago, and I will be leading another one at the Gathering Partners Conference in May. And so, it's important to remember this can be a form of transportation, but then that requires different infrastructure. And I'm absolutely delighted that my local library, people can check out a bicycle on their library card for free. These are meant to be used for grocery shopping. They have high capacity storage. And this program was so successful, I think you can check out bikes for a week at a time and even a season, a summer at a time, depending upon your need level. So I'm really excited about that program. Now I'm going to switch to energy. So even bikes have crossed over to energy when you have electric bikes. So energy is a policy decision above the household. So, my energy use is out of Rochester Public Utility. That is a public utility. So there is at least a board with whom I can engage. And it's really easy to find aspirations about what utilities want. So Rochester-based utility provides a pledge to be 80% carbon free in 10 years. That'll be 2030. I will tell you, I was completely unsuccessful at finding their actual carbon-free percentage today. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that matters. But this is where it's really important that we as community members and consumers and citizens advocate for this larger policy change. So what RPS does greatly impacts me, but my ability to decide is limited. I can only choose RPS. I don't get another consumer choice. Similarly, I'm not going to go into the differences between all of the different vehicles, hybrid, electric, and gas, but I will say every single time we get in and drive a vehicle, we make choices that have environmental impacts. The easiest one is to follow the law and go the speed limits. It turns out that, of course, we know for gas vehicles that, the slower you go, the more efficient the vehicle is. It turns out it's even more so for electric vehicles. They lose efficiency at greater rates at higher speeds. It is also the safest approach. So I will tell you, as I drive the speed limit, and I have a son who is eligible to take his driving test next week. So we've been practicing. And so we drive the speed limit. We are in the deep minority of people that drive the speed limit. And so again, it is safest, it is most environmentally friendly, it is most cost effective, and it is legal. And this decision you make every single time you get in a car. So now I'm going to switch to home energy. So I have owned 2 houses in Rochester. Both were old. So both times I got an energy audit. So the state offers this program. My experience is it's typically implemented through your local utility. It's always been subsidized when I've gotten it, but there's a website, again, the link will be dropped in later. The Minnesota Department of Commerce Home Energy Assessment. In the energy audit, they include a review of your energy bills, a blower door test to determine air leakage. This matters in our very cold climate. We do not want to leak all of our heat out in the winter or our air conditioning in the summer. Infrared scans to detect insulation level leaks. Efficiency and safety testing for appliances. This is really important if you have like gas appliances. And a thorough visual inspection of attic walls, crawl space, foundation, basement, windows, doors, and roof problems. I will freely admit, every time I have one of these done, I think I've had 3 now, it feels like I pay someone to write me a laundry list of to-do chores that cost money. And it's not always really fun to get that laundry list. But where I've landed is that it's an important list to have. I do not have to implement every single one all the time. But when there's an opportunity to implement, I need a new furnace or it's time to replace my water heater, I can go back and do that. Some I'm motivated to do quickly, like increase my insulation, and some I'll just plug away at over time. And so I think that's the best way to think about it. So we had an energy audit done as soon as we moved into the house, and he immediately said, you need more insulation. And so we did do that very quickly. We got more insulation. Then, of course, he said, you should, get rid of all your incandescent lights. And so I did. So now I have this pile of LED lights. There's nothing sexy about it, but it turns out it matters. And so kind of a long story I'm not going to go into, but my furnace was kind of on the blitz back in 2020. And so I knew that we were going to need a new furnace. And we did have an energy efficient furnace when we purchased the house, but it was getting old. And so I went to replace it, and I really wanted to get off of natural gas. And it turns out I can do that with a heat pump. It's relatively new technology. But then that launched a whole series of complications related to my electrical panel. So I ended up talking to my utility company about this, and this was so happy for me. Our utility company compared our electrical use to that of a single person in an apartment. I was floored. I had no idea. And this was during the 6 months of the pandemic when there were 3 adults, my husband, myself, and my brother, all living with us, 2 boys living and working and schooling from the house full time. So I was definitely pleased, but a little flabbergasted. Ultimately, I could not get what I wanted because of all of these challenges. And so I was able to get a heat pump, but because of policy, I was required to also get a high efficiency natural gas furnace, which I did not want. And that was able to be installed in the fall. So I then could at least sleep easy that I wasn't going to have my heat go off because of back ordered pandemic related problems. So my heat pump that I wanted was just installed last week. But this was really interesting. I went from an old high efficiency furnace, natural gas, to a new high efficiency furnace, natural gas. And you can see this drop in my gas bill. Now, ultimately, I want to go away from gas. And so that's what my heat pump should allow me to do next winter. But the other thing I really wanted to point out is this is classic normative messaging in my actual utility bill, right? So it compares me to great consumers, good consumers, and those that use more than average, and then it ranks me in my usage last year. So there's still room for improvement, which I think I have done, and I hope to see a significant improvement next year because of my brand new installed heat pump. Now, this was expensive. My husband complains about it regularly. It was really twice as expensive needed because I had to get that furnace. That is a policy issue. So as more consumers come across this barrier, like myself, then hopefully we'll be able to influence policy and then change this so it won't be so cumbersome for the others. Now I'm going to switch a little bit to carbon footprints. If you're unfamiliar with this, carbon footprint is the total greenhouse gas emissions caused by an individual, event, organization, service, place, or product, expressed as the carbon dioxide equivalent. All right, and so there are several calculators. So the Environmental Protection Agency has one. It's quite good. I don't think it's quite as user-friendly as this Cool Climate one created by UC Berkeley. They both functionally do the same thing, so you can play with them both. I noticed that several other organizations use this Cool Climate one out of UC Berkeley for what that's worth. I think because it's a smidge more user-friendly. So what does that mean? So if I calculate my carbon footprint, I then could decide that I'm going to buy carbon offsets. So often these are projects like planting trees. So the idea is that if I plant more trees, then those trees absorb carbon, and that can offset the carbon for my husband's new job, which requires a lot of flying, for example. There's lots of different places that will do this. This is one organization that I participate with. And so I was down a bit of a rabbit hole and I needed to get out. So I didn't rejigger this for the changes we made over the winter. So I'd like to think this is lower today than it was a year ago or 2 years ago when I did it. But alas, this is the number. And then I have decided that I will, in order to offset my personal average daily, total of 13.9 carbon tons per year, with a monthly subscription fee to offset that. So at this point, it cost me about $22 a month for a total of $264 per year. And that's just a choice that I have made. And then it supports these types of carbon offset projects. And the projects are variable. Some are in East Africa. This one I think is in California. This is in the Amazon. There are others. And so the idea is that those projects are going to take carbon out of the atmosphere to offset my use. And so then just as a comparison, if myself and my family want to fly to California, my 2 boys, it would be the equivalent of $180 in carbon offset would be that cost. So again, I think this number is a smidge old, but I needed to get out of my deep rabbit hole. But what I like about this chart is it compares me to the United States. We are one of the world's largest contributors of carbon and that the world has ever known. And you can see this compared to the UK, India, and the rest of the world. So I think it is really our responsibility and duty to figure out how to bring this down because we are a disproportionately large contributor to the problem. And so this is using that California climate, cool climate thing. And I really wanted to show you this, right? So this is if you put all these numbers in and I did, and this isn't quite right. I calculate our travel differently, and I'll say a little bit about that in a moment, because we do sometimes some very big trips, like that trip to Europe over spring break, and it blows your annual out of the water, and I don't think it's reflective of year over year, so I calculate that separately. But look at this. So today, using my electricity and natural gas usage from 2021, so not my new system, or at least not entirely, this is what it is. And if I put in 40% renewable energy from my Rochester Public Utility, again, that number I could not find, so I'm guessing 40%, you can see that I'm 31% better than average. If all I do is toggle over Rochester Public Utilities renewable energy portfolio to 60%, I jump 5% in my comparisons to the rest of the United States. That is super interesting, right? I haven't done anything as a consumer, my utility company has. And if my utility company goes to 100% renewable, which is the goal of most utilities at this point by like 2050, then all of a sudden I drop a whole 14 points from today, right? And I haven't done anything differently. My utility has done something different. So I think this is where it's really important to advocate for these larger policy changes whenever we can. And so I said a little bit about this travel comparison. I pulled that out separately for our big trips. And so just to show you, I use a different calculator because this is one out of the United Kingdom. I really like it because it includes buses and trains and public transit. I really like train travel. It is much more carbon friendly. It's hard to get in the United States. And so if my family 4 of us were to fly to Sacramento, California, This would be the carbon impact. For 4 people round trip, it would be 2.8 carbon equivalents, which would be a cost of at $30 per ton of carbon, it would be $84. Similarly, if we take a big road trip and we drive in my gas car, I put in the make and model, it is 1.36 carbon equivalent for a dollar equation of $34. We drove. And so, I mean, that is a different experience. I totally concede it takes 2 days to drive there versus, 3 hours to fly, right? But we now do this regularly. So I'm going to switch to Earth Care, and then I'm going to close out with another story about carbon credits. So during the pandemic in particular, I really needed a way to get my boys out of the house, up every day, so they were ready to do online schooling. And so we started to do several things. And one of them was adopt this local woodlot very near to my house. We can walk there. It was full of invasive species. It was just a mess. We were able to get some friends to help us. And so we did it every couple of days. We'd go out there. Every single work or school morning, we got up, we walked up the hill, we sat for 5 minutes and forest bathed under a tree, and we walked back down. It made everybody in my family get up, get dressed, get food in their tummy, get out of the house, and then get back to the house in time to school and work. And I continue to do that. I'm the only one still working at home, but I do it every morning. We did some tree planting in the woodlot as well. And this is what happened within a year of starting to work it. This is the woodlot before. This is the same tree, a hackberry. We removed all of this invasive understory. And the very next year, the bluebells came up, which was shocking. I had no idea they were there. And so, it does have its gratifications. My kids don't love it. This is not where they want to spend their time and energy. But during the pandemic, when soccer and track were canceled and everyone was homebound, this got us out and moving every single day. And so I'm forever grateful for that. Similarly, family decisions are complicated. And so I said I would kind of close with this. So I calculated in advance of this presentation, I waited so it would be fresh in my mind, our carbon offset credits for my husband's work-related travel. And then I purchased those credits online, and he immediately called me. What did you do? And I said, that thing I said I would be doing that I did last year and I told you I would do this year. Like, you took this new job, it required a lot of travel. I said it caused me climate anxiety, and this is what I would do. And then he promptly sent me this email. But Delta says I can buy carbon when I buy the ticket. And I said, but you didn't. And he said, no, he didn't. I said, great. Well, I've done that for you for 2021. And he goes, but if I did this next time, would you not do that? And I said, yes, if you buy carbon credits when you buy the tickets, then I will not duplicate your carbon credits. But this was really interesting. So this is Delta. And so all you're doing is buying carbon credit to offset your flight. But super interestingly, that these carbon credits are different prices, right? So this is $12 per ton. This is $26 per ton, and it includes a 20% tax in the UK. This is in Kenya, and it's $21 per ton. So I just thought that was really fascinating. So with that, here are all the resources. I'm going to drop them into the chat, but now it is time for questions. So I will stop sharing and we can field questions.
Angela, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us. Julie is going to put the evaluation into the chat at this time. I know some of our friends might need to leave a little bit earlier, but if you could just take some time to just give us some comments about your experience with our family-friendly Earth Care series. And if you have ideas and recommendations for other series of webinars, please let us know. There's a lot of comments and questions in the chat. Julie, would you like to kind of go through those and let us know what
I can do that. The first question, or comment, there is a ton of garlic mustard at the Mississippi Regional Park near me. Would it be acceptable to harvest from the public park since it's an invasive plant?
Yeah, so you need to speak with your natural resource professional first, without a doubt. So the answer is probably yes. I mean, ecologically, yes, but you need to talk to your natural resource professional. And I will try to quickly find, we have a great video about this actually, about how to talk with your natural resource professional to do this very thing. So I'm gonna try to dig that up real quick.
Okay, and then from Linda, it's a kind of a statement, jumping worms or red wiggler worms. She has a question. Are they jumping worms or red wiggler worms? Jumping worms are invasive in New York. Were you talking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, jumping worms are invasive in New York. They're also invasive here in Minnesota. Jumping worms are different than red wigglers. So they're not the same and they need to be treated separately. And red wigglers are typically used for compost. I will say right now that many people cannot identify their worms. So that is a problem. So we know that jumping worms have been included in red wiggler composting worms, and we think it's a mistake. They just don't know how to identify them.
And then you have a question. They're curious about the distance between home and school.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will tell you that, I mean, each school's district, as I understand it, has a different acceptable length for walkability. And that's typically, I think, less than 2 miles, although it does change with age, right? So the younger the kid, the shorter the distance, the older the kid, the bigger the distance. And so my kids, to walk to school, it was about, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile, maybe half a mile through good neighborhoods. I mean, we knew that the route, we picked the route, all of that stuff. And then now they're in middle school and high school. And so they have to cross bigger roads. They're on their bikes. So my middle schooler, it's probably a mile that he bikes to school. And my high schooler, it's 1.5 miles, maybe. So not very far. But when I picked that radius of walkability to the library, that meant that I was walkable to many, many things. So that was the priority that I made when we purchased the house, and it wasn't an accident. Great question. I dropped in the link for in the Master Naturalist Invasive Species website, and there are a couple of videos there. One is working with natural resource professionals on invasive species removal.
Okay, and then you have another question. Who did your home energy assessment?
Yeah, so I get those through my public utility. So I call Rochester, it's on their website, Rochester Public Utility is where I go. And then there, usually there's a link to a contractor. And I think the utility has a pre-negotiated agreement. So I just drop into that. Every single time I've tried to do them, I've done 3. There's also been a subsidy through my utility. I think that's super normal. But you need to go to your local utility is I dropped in the website for the Minnesota Department of Commerce, but ultimately I think you'll go to your local utility.
Okay, and another one, do the carbon offsets plants native to the area?
It's an excellent question, and I like it. So the answer is it all depends, right? And so what I didn't say, when I have picked where I purchase my carbon, then I pick the organization. So I don't know as extension that I can recommend one versus another, but I have purchased carbon credits from the Arbor Day Foundation because they work with domestic tree issues. They've been around for a long time. And as a forester, I understand that the work they do. And I will tell you right now, they do not sell all native trees, which kind of bothers me, but I do trust that they work with natural resource professionals on the ground to plant appropriate species. And so that I'm placing my trust in their good decision-making, right? The other organization I am placing my trust in is an entirely different model. They're a for-profit company, and they do work across the world because this is a climate issue, and I think it's going to take a global approach. When my husband said, if I get it through Delta, and I said, right, we are then trusting Delta to make good decisions on where they're investing, what they're giving us choices to do. And I'll tell you, Delta is incentivized to greenwash their marketing, right? And so I said, I just want to own that we are now trusting Delta to make those decisions. So to answer your question is, I don't necessarily know. As a consumer, I can look into where I choose to do those carbon offsets, and I strongly recommend you do, because this is very much a wild west out there. There's not a lot of regulation about carbon offsets. And so there's a lot of places. I mean, there's a credit card. Every dollar I spend, they plant a tree. I will tell you right now, the forester in me knows that we don't have enough seedlings to plant all those trees. We don't have the infrastructure set up to create the seedlings, and we don't necessarily have the acreage on whence to put them, right? So I think it's good to be skeptical and do your research as a consumer.
And I have one more here. I wonder if the US has such a large footprint because of cars/sprawl and decentralized living conditions.
Yeah, I think those are 2 big ones for sure. I mean, I've given this a lot of thought, and we have just created a lot of infrastructure that is different from places in the world that have lower footprints. I mean, I don't live in India by choice. My extended family is is in India, but they live in decidedly more concentrated environments, right? So there's way more people in every square mile of India than in the United States. And so as a result, they have they have a smaller footprint, similar to Europe. I mean, much of Europe is more concentrated. You don't have to walk everywhere you live in. You share resources more. And so the United States developed at a period where that was different. Car manufacturers started here. And I do think that really creates infrastructure that makes it hard to make some of these really environmentally friendly choices. And I mean, I completely concede that if you're a farmer in outstate Minnesota, your kids are very unlikely to be able to bike to school. I mean, these are very long distances that they're traveling, right? And yet, do we need farmers in order to produce food? Absolutely. But this is sort of the infrastructure that we've created. And I will tell you, having just been to Europe, farmers can function very differently in Europe. I mean, we could take a bus and be in the middle of a farm field, and that was easy to do. And so different infrastructure. So I think the commenter is correct.
Okay, there have been a few more pop in the chat here. Thank you for sharing, Angela. Fascinating. I wonder about how electric vehicles rank in comparison to gas vehicles, considering the source of electricity is often from the carbon producing energy.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely, and I will tell you a little backstory. When I was a teenager, my family bought the electric car way before that was normal. It was all golf cart batteries, and it never escaped my irony that we lived in Indiana and all of our electricity came from coal. Right. So what is that about? So I think it is really important as consumers to know where this electricity comes from. But I will also say that that if you look at Minnesota, if you look at utility companies across the United States, they are all pledging to be more renewable energy. I mean, their pledges are easy to find. The actual breakdown of energy is harder to find. But without subsidies, renewable energy is inexpensive, right? I mean, the future is going to renewable energy. So I think it's important to recognize that if I buy an electric car today, and even if my utility is only 40% renewable energy, so 60% non-renewable energy, but I'm likely buying that car for 10 years. And in the next 10 years, that utility is likely to become more and more renewable, right? So it is true that today it might not be what you want it to be, but the only way you're going to get away from gas is to go to electric, and electric has and is converting to renewable energy. And to be clear, my gas vehicle will never be an environmentally friendly. I mean, gas is absolutely a non-renewable resource. Same as natural gas in my furnace. There's no way that natural gas is ever going to be renewable energy. So the only way I can get away from that is a different source, be that geothermal, electric heat pump, or electric, or, you know, if I want to burn firewood, right? But my natural gas will never be anything but a non-renewable resource.
Couple more. What would be your best suggestion to make to our friends and family?
I think just normalizing earth-friendly behavior, right? I mean, so whether that is the more you can make it normal, the more you talk about it and you're not embarrassed by it, and, you know, the better it is. And I think, you know, how many times do you recycle that box at Christmas? You know, is it acceptable to put in used items at Christmas as a gift? And it isn't for many, many families, right? But I can tell you, boy, we have gift boxes and bags and boxes that go back decades, you know? And so these are subtle ways, like if you can make that, and I'm thinking about resistant members of your family. I certainly have those. But the more you can make it normal and the more you can enable other people to make it normal, the better. And I will tell you, when it comes to walking and biking, I think my family has helped others feel comfortable with those choices. There's a lot of parental pressure to protect your children all the time. That almost always means in a car with a grown-up. And I have to tell you, I do not think that's the best form of protection. And so I push my kids out, and we now have people that go with us.
Okay, another question. Having just watched Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy, it seems like the most effective change we can make are to go vegan, no meat, fish, and dairy. Is that your conclusion as well?
Yeah, so it is clear that vegan has the lowest environmental footprint. I will tell you, I've tried vegan a couple of times and I struggled to give up eggs and cheese. I'll just own that struggle. And my kids are not interested in that, right? And so, what is the next best thing? It's vegetarian, but it is absolutely true that there are fewer caloric resources that go into eating fruits and vegetables and grown plant material. Absolutely, no doubt about it. And so one of the things that I've done is every year come the end of the holidays, I feel like a bloated pig, and we got to step back from that, right? And so I've done some pretty significant diet changes in January, just for the month of January. And so this year I was vegan for the month of January. I started out eating a bunch of smoothies, which is not fun in January because they're all cold. But then I hung it out and did vegan. And I will tell you, I deeply missed eggs and cheese, but it felt a little bit like practices at Lent. Come February, I was so delighted for even just a smattering of eggs and cheese in my diet. It made me remember how great they are, but I didn't need as many of them. Right. And so, and even Lent, I mean, if you just decide for the month of Lent that you're going to go vegan, or just the Fridays of Lent, or whatever cultural practices that you might have, each of those little incremental steps help. And each of them also reminds you to be thankful for when you do decide to indulge or participate in those other things. And that's what meat is to my boys. They absolutely eat meat, but it's not an everyday thing.
Let's take one more question as we wrap up, or one more comment, Julie.
Okay, I'm going to do this very last one. Don't animals have a valid, important place in the ecosystem? I'm thinking about those studies that shows remnants help restore grasslands better than animal-free areas. So it feels, okay.
Yep, absolutely, for sure. And as a forester who appreciates agroforestry, absolutely, hands down. And that's one of the reasons why I don't feel a ton of baggage about dairy and eggs, right? But I do care about where my dairy and eggs come from. And so, we took bison out of the ecosystem. If we want oak savannas, then we best be putting ungulates back in those landscapes and putting fire back on those landscapes. Absolutely. Similarly, I have absolutely no environmental baggage with, say, deer that is appropriately harvested, right? I mean, it is local, no, resources, no intentional resources went into that. Tons of resources go into deer. So a lot of your wild harvested, appropriately hunted and fished materials are, I think, really good sources of protein. Absolutely. I do want to recognize that the average consumer is not paying that much attention to where they're getting those materials, right? And so that is really important. So if I want to feel best about those good agricultural and agroforestry practices, then I need to know the farmer that's doing them. And is it free range? Are those bison getting taken in and out of the woods in a good rotation? And CSAs will allow you to know your farmer. I mean, that is a real thing, right? So you can become a member of the CSA. Often they send you newsletters and pictures, and then you see them every single week and you get to know them and their family, and you can ask those questions. But your standard meat at Hy-Vee, it does not necessarily come with it. It does not come with those practices. Great question.
Great, thank you. And Julie has put the link into the chat for the evaluation. Please take a moment to fill that out. And Angela, thank you so much for all of your information today. So greatly appreciated. And to all of you, thank you for attending, and happy Earth Day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Julie. We will see you.
Yeah, I did put the link in a couple times, the
Perfect.
evaluation
Thank you.
link, so hopefully they all got it.
All right, goodbye.
Okay, bye.